Very first time I can remember having contact with him. I love being in nature. I love hiking, and I was on a hiking trail during one of those 3 months that I was didn't have a job, and I heard a voice, another voice that said, "I love you. I've always loved you." And it kind of stopped me in my tracks, and I was like, "What was that? That was weird." And I'm thinking, "Did I just say that to myself?" And I remember I just kept walking, and then suddenly this tree beside me starts moving and cracking and making this weird noise I'd never heard. And I was like, "That's really weird." And so I went back and I just was watching this tree, and then I heard it again. It said, "I always loved you." And I was like, "Dad?"
Welcome to the Light the Day podcast, where we explore spiritually transformative experiences. I'm your host, Julie Clough, and I'd like to welcome to the show my good friend, Angie Harris. Hi, Angie.
Hello, Julie.
Thanks
I'm
so
so
much for being
excited.
on the show. This is going to be
Yes,
fun.
I'm super excited to be with you.
Great. Will you share just a little bit about yourself before we go into the backstory of how you got to where you are right now?
Yeah. So my name's Angie. I actually live in Kansas, and I am a spiritual mentor and healer, and I help people release karmic energy and trauma that they've taken on throughout their life that have kept them from remembering who they are as spiritual beings. And so I've been a healer my whole life, and became a spiritual healer a couple years ago. And so that's what I do now, is help mentor people back into their higher consciousness.
Oh, I love that. I love your description of that. That's beautiful. And anybody who deals in the space of trauma and release has got a story to tell. So let's go back in time and just share a little bit about yourself before you, because I know you've like so many of us have gone through different phases of life. So just take us back to wherever you want to start your story and share a little bit about your background.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll just start from the beginning. My life has a lots of twists and turns in it, and so there's no way to share it all. But as a very young girl, I saw spirits. And I would see things in my room, and I would hear things. I would hear something speaking my voice, or not my voice, saying my name. And it at the time I came into the earth with a lot of trauma within my family. And so I believe in many ways the energy I was around caused me to be in a lot of fear, even as a young child. However, I was still very connected somehow to who I was as a spiritual being, because I have a clear memory that's came back in the recent years of healing myself when I was around 4 or 5. I had cut my leg. I probably was playing with my mom's razor or something in the bathtub. And I remember kind of thinking I was going to get in trouble for having this cut on my leg. And so somehow in my mind, my little mind, I thought, "Oh, I can just heal this." And so I placed my hand over this cut on my leg, and I started to focus my energy, and I watched it disappear off my leg. And so this is something
Wow.
I've recently remembered that happened. Now, things around 5, 6 started to really shake up in my life. My parents were always fighting and not getting along when I was very young. I have a younger brother that's 2 years younger than me. And I had a granny that helped step in to help raise my brother and I. And she wasn't really a grandma. She was like a cousin, aunt, someone, that had been in the family, that she had helped raise my mother as well. And so she kind of stepped in when my mom and dad weren't around to help raise my brother and I. And so my parents divorced when I was very young, when I was 5. My dad remarried when I was 6. So within like 6 months of the divorce, he was remarried to another woman. I gained two older stepsisters in that. And then my mom began to date around to try to find a partner, and ended up marrying an abusive man when I was around 6, almost 7.
Uh,
Um, and so at this time, my life really, I mean, not that it was perfect before, but it really kind of took a turn at that point where this man was very narcissistic, abusive, mentally, physically, sexually, like a lot of mental neglect and gaslighting. And I kind of started to go downhill at that time where I was disassociating a lot. I did not remember my trauma until I had my spiritual awakening, that I actually went through a lot of this stuff. And so from age 6 to 16, we lived in this home with this narcissistic man. And he didn't just abuse me, he abused the whole family. And
mm,
around age 15 or so, um, I still have this really strange connected connection to spirituality. Like when I would go visit my dad every other weekend or once in a while, he got the newspaper, and I remember I'd always get the newspaper on a Sunday morning and look up my horoscope because I was just like there was something that kept drawing me into this spiritual thing. And I was seeking answers because I was still having weird experiences. I was still seeing things. I was still hearing things, and nobody believed me. Even at, between the trauma going on at home and my weird spiritual experiences, at age 12, I was put in a mental hospital. And I was in the mental hospital for a couple months. Um, and I would share things with them, and of course they were trying to help me heal or medicate me, and they wouldn't believe what I'd shared was going on in the home. And so I learned to just be quiet at that time. And I wanted to find something to help me in the world,
yeah.
to understand myself and understand the world around me, and to feel safe and loved, basically. And I think that is why around age 15, I ended up in the church.
Okay.
And so I did not grow up.
Before we talk about that part of your story, let's back up just a little bit because you mentioned that when you were very young, you were seeing spirits. How did you interpret that as a young person?
I was scared of them. I
Yeah.
remember there was one particular spirit that I saw in my room every single night. And I still remember, I know exactly I could draw you a picture of what it looks like today. It had long, lengthy arms and legs, and it was very tall, probably I would say it's up to the ceiling of my room. It was always over in one area of my room, but it would move around at night sometimes. And I would tell people there's something in my room, and they wouldn't believe me. And so one night I had my little 2-year-old brother come and sleep with me, and I said maybe he'll see it, and he did. And he'll talk about that today, that he still saw that. But I think it was because of the energy in the home that I was in that I saw these things as scary,
Mm-hmm.
or I was afraid of them because I didn't understand it, and there was no adult around me that could help me understand what I was engaging with or seeing.
Yeah.
Um,
So now looking back, you see those as more benevolent, those spirits that were with you. It's almost like they were there
mhm.
as a comfort and protection, maybe.
Yes, and I have since asked, now that I kind of work with spirits and understand them a little bit more, I've asked what that spirit was that I engaged with when I was younger. And they explained to me that it was a protector that came to be with me in my early years as I came to be human.
Okay.
Um, at the time, I didn't understand that. Now I can accept that and see it differently.
Yeah.
But I just discovered that it's the energy you see something in that causes you to fear it or not.
That makes a lot of sense. And then then what's interesting too that I picked up in your story is that a lot of times when children are young, they have imaginary friends or they see spirit or they say, "Oh, I saw grandma," or whatever, and as adults they kind of dismiss it, but I think what I heard you say is that this continued even after this. Like you didn't like age out of this. Like most kids will age out of this at 3, 4, 5, 6 years old. It sounds like it continued from there.
Yeah, it never stopped. Um,
And
yeah.
do you feel like, or do you feel like this was one of the reasons that you were hospitalized then? Was it a contributing factor?
I think partly it was also because of the things I was experiencing at home, and I was very depressed and, sad, and
Okay,
I didn't want to live. And with those two things combined together, you appear to be a little mentally unstable. And so I almost wonder if people didn't believe me when I did speak up about what was happening
I'm
because
sure.
of those other experiences of me saying, "Oh, I see and hear things." And
Yeah.
so I
But you
think
weren't believed about the abuse either, it sounds like.
no, no, they did not believe. And if I mean, not to my knowledge, I know that at one point there were people that got involved that were going to remove me from the home. And I was told to lie about what was happening in the home. And so we ended up staying, and I don't know what would have happened had I been removed, but I do know that it also plays a part that people thought there was something wrong with me
Well,
because
yeah.
I had all these strange things going
Well,
on.
and here you are, a young person, and you're in this. It's challenging anyway, regardless. You're experiencing this abuse, but then on the other hand, it's almost like the alternative is scary too.
Mhm.
Being removed from the home, that's traumatizing.
Yeah.
So it's you're put in this really, really challenging position. So it's no wonder that you had these you had to have this intervention to keep you here.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. It was, I really just needed something to help me feel like I belonged somewhere at that point because I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere in the world. And all the places I should have belonged, I didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you met some Christian friends.
Yes. I was I think, a freshman, and some of my close friends were Christians going to youth group every week. They would invite me, and I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. I was totally against church, totally against doing anything like that. And you ask enough times, somebody gets wore down, and they're like, okay, I'll try it. And so around age 16, I went to a youth camp with my friends, totally thinking I'm just gonna go hang out, nothing's gonna happen here. And as I was sitting, I still remember it was in this barn somewhere, and we were sitting on like the floor of this barn, and the youth pastor, whoever was up there talking about something, I have no idea what they were talking about. But I remember something triggered me to start crying. And I couldn't stop crying. I was crying and crying and crying. And I'm sure it was because I was feeling all the pain that I had in my body that I hadn't felt up until that point. And before I knew it, everybody in the room was around me. And they were all like, "Are you accepting the Lord? And we'll lead you through the Lord's prayer." And I'm thinking, I don't know what that means, but I can't say no because you were surrounding me. And so I said, yes, like I want to do that. And so I went through the Lord's Prayer with all these people, and suddenly I'm a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I went home from that camp and told my mom, I was standing in the kitchen one day, and I looked at my mom and I was like, I became a Christian this weekend. And she looked at me and she said, "Are you sure you want to do that?" And that's when I was like, I don't know. I don't know if I want to, but it felt safe in the moment. And so something in me, whether it was rebellion or against my mom or what it was, decided I was just going to keep going back to church. And so that's when my journey in the church started at age 16, and I became very, very involved with
Well,
that.
you found a place to belong, and I think that's a big piece. I also kind of want to go back to this space where you were in this space with all these kids and all of this, for lack of a better word, energy that was happening, this uplifted energy. And so often emotions and spirituality, they're just so intertwined that
Mhm.
a lot of times when we have emotional upset, it's challenging to connect with the spiritual because it brings up all the emotion that feels unsafe. And so yeah, I just want to acknowledge your experience in that space.
Hmm.
So you began going regularly to this church.
Yes. Yeah. Around this time, the, I don't, I'm not upset about my time in the church because I do think it's what I needed at the time. Because at that time, because of what was going on in my home, I didn't know any other way to get out of that situation in my home. And so I began to pray. I didn't know how to pray. I never had prayed in my life. So I started writing letters to God every night. I started asking if there is a God in the world somewhere, please help us get out of this situation that we were in. And so every single night before I went to bed, I'd write God a letter. Please help us. Please help us. And within 6 months, my mom announced that she was going to divorce my stepdad. And so that things got a little crazy at the time. But she met another man, and that man kind of helped pull her out of the marriage. And that's when I was kind of like, okay, so maybe there's something to this God thing. Maybe this prayer thing works. And so I'm gonna go all in with this. And because of the people I was around in the church and the youth group I was going to, everybody in that youth group went to a Christian college, a certain Christian college. And so I made up my mind I was going to go to this Christian college and I was going to go become a minister to help people like me get back or get out of their sin or struggles that they were in and be saved by God.
Mm-hmm.
And so around, when we left my stepdad, we changed schools. And so that was hard in itself to change in the middle of the high school. And so I spent my last 2 years at a new school and then I went to a Christian college to start my degree in being a youth minister, basically to help save people. Um, but I think that also was a part of this inner knowing that I'm supposed to help people and I'm supposed to be a healer, unknowingly how to do it. And that was the way that I knew I could do it. And so I spent some several years in the Christian college. I did a ton of missions work. I was in India and Laos and Thailand and traveled all over to Chicago, LA, did all this stuff for God. Um, really, really focused on being the best Christian I could and trying to not sin and be upright and love the Lord and everything about me. Like those that knew me at that time knew that's my person. My whole personality was about my faith and how I portrayed myself to the world. And it
Well,
was,
and what a beautiful heart. What a beautiful heart to do all that mission work, to devote your time and energy to God, to other people within that, within that group. So that's beautiful. And I know that things shifted and changed over time for you, but
mm-hmm.
I do also feel like that was just a beautiful space for you. And like you said, that, I just love the idea of you writing letters to God and expressing yourself in that way, and how healing that must have been for you to be able to feel like you had an outlet for
Yeah,
all that you were experiencing.
absolutely.
Super challenging.
Yes. Yeah, I had by the time I was in my 30s, I had so many journals of prayers and things like that. And what's the interesting thing is I was still having spiritual experiences. I was still seeing shadows around me. I was still hearing things and in having these really strange spiritual experiences. And I would write them in these prayer journals or letters that I was sending or writing to God. And I remember because the church, if I said anything to the church at the time, they explained to me that it was demonic activity or there were evil spirits and that they were around me because I was a sinner and I was doing something wrong. And so that's why I was constantly trying to be the best Christian I could be. And wondering what is wrong with me that keeps these kind of things around me. And I still remember, I'll share this story in particular. There was when I was working in Chicago, I spent about 3 months in Chicago working with inner city kids, and we were out on a campground. And there was an evening that I was traveling between one building to another, and it was dark out, and I was by myself. And I walked out of my room to go back outside, and suddenly I felt there was something outside waiting for me, and fear came over me. And I walked outside, and as soon as I turned a corner, I saw a very large shadow figure standing there waiting at the bottom of these stairs I'd walked down, and fear overtook me. And I started to walk through the dark woods by myself, praying, please don't hurt me, please don't hurt me, please don't hurt me. And of course it didn't. But those kind of things would happen to me all the time, where I would be trying to do something good for God and being this really amazing Christian woman. And then I would run into this kind of a spirit that would be following me around, unknowing that I was a medium, unknowing that I could see spirits and that I could engage with them. And so that caused even more fear in me and pushed me even more into the church to try to alleviate and heal whatever was causing me to have these experiences. And I wrote these experiences in those journals. And there was this time period where I was overseas for a while. And I came home and found my journals all over my room, and my mom had read them and
Mm.
called all my friends and told them that I was crazy and that I believed all these things were watching and, following me, and, all these demon things. And so there were several times throughout my life where these kind of things happened, where I was put in positions where people would learn about something about me and then kind of pull away from me. And so I really stopped allowing people to get close to me, because the more they knew about me, the more that they would find these things out that I could do, or, these experiences. And so it was kind of hard to have, to try to be this really amazing Christian woman and still have these really weird spiritual experiences throughout it. And so I just kept seeking and seeking and seeking what is going on. And that just, I mean, I dove into the Bible front to back, reading it every single day, taking notes, every single version of the Bible. Like, I wanted to find the truth of what was really happening to me and who God really was, and how to explain these experiences, because every time I asked the question, I never felt like I got a real response or a way to stop it, because it would never stop for me.
Why do you think that was the case? Looking at it from your perspective now, why do you think that was the case, that things didn't stop, that this continued to happen?
Because I think that now that I am awoken and see it differently, I think that it was always part of who I was supposed to be on this earth, is to reveal those kind of things, to share the experience that we're eternal beings, that we don't die, we just transform in energy. And now that I've spent more time working with spirits, a lot of the spirits that I engaged with back then were my family members that had passed,
Mm.
or they were energies of spirits that were seeking support and help to move into the light, that hadn't been able to do that yet, or they're wanting to talk to their loved ones and get a message to them. And so I think that the spirits know who they can engage with and who will hear and see them, and they'll do what they can to get their attention. Um, and there's people that for some reason they just stay connected throughout their life, no matter what they
Yeah,
try to do to disconnect,
yeah,
because it is their purpose of being here on earth.
yeah. Yeah. So as you continued to have this one idea of what was happening, what changed? And if we're not there yet, that's fine. But I'm
Yeah.
really curious what changed. What was the light switch that was like, oh, wait a second.
Yeah. So I believe that things really I wasn't aware of this, but I think things began to shift around when I was about 24. I had a really, really weird experience between 24, 25, I think, where I was for some reason completely rebelling. I had just got back from overseas, I think maybe Thailand. And when you've been in another culture for a while and you come back to this culture, you kind of go through culture shock. And so, because I had been around like Buddhism quite a bit, I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to study Buddhism. And so I come back and I start studying Buddhism and start thinking, okay, I don't know if I want to be a Christian anymore. And so I'm starting to just do this rebellion kind of thing. And then I find myself in a position where I am back in a church setting and just don't want to be there. And this really interesting person was staring at me from the other side of the room. And he ended up walking over to me and tapping me on the shoulder and said, "Can I pray for you?" And I was like, "Whatever, fine, that's fine. You can pray for me." So I stand up and he begins to pray for me. And I do believe that he probably was a prophet or was able to get messages, because I think there are people in the church that are connected to spirit that are able to share things. So he starts saying all this stuff to me that nobody would know. And I'm like, oh my God, what is happening here?
Wow.
And before I know it, I still don't really necessarily know exactly what happened to me in this moment, but I felt an actual lightning bolt come down through the top of my head, go all the way through my body, and I fell down on the ground. And it scared the crap out of me. And I stood back up really quickly and I started yelling at this man and saying,
Mm.
"I don't know what you just did to me, but that was scary. Like, I don't want that." And something switched in me at that moment. I don't know what it was. I don't know. The spirit has kind of revealed to me a little bit about how my own energy shifted at that time to help me awaken a little bit. But at that moment, something shifted, and then I started having visions, and I started having dreams, and I started having predictions of the future, and all these weird things started happening.
Do you remember any of the things that the man said when he was praying for you?
I don't, to be honest, I really don't. I know that he said something about you're trying to run away from your gift or from something, and you can't do that, and God will get you where you're supposed to go somewhere, another. And I'm like, okay, whatever. At this
Mm.
point, I was not interested. But when you have a purpose and a mission on earth, spirit will guide you towards it no matter how you get there.
I
And
mean,
so that,
what's really, really obvious is how sensitive your system is, that he brought in this message and it struck you in that way.
yes.
That is it's just a very obvious pattern of how
Yeah, yeah,
sensitive
there's
your system
no
is.
escaping it. It's just like whatever way they needed to use to get me on path, they would. So I went back to the church after that because I'm like, I can't deny that just happened. However, I just never felt like I fit in or I belonged. And so I just kept seeking the truth, just seeking the truth. And um then I was still having these weird experiences. I was still having dreams. I was still having visions, and they were intensifying at this point. And so I was going through life. I was working in the mental health field, trying to help everybody heal in the world. Um, and in 2016, in I think it was June or July of 2016, I was in my backyard mowing my yard, and I still, all these times that these happened, I still remember exactly where I was and how I felt. I'm
I
walking,
get that.
push mowing. Yeah, I'm push mowing my yard and I hear an audible voice, nothing like I'd ever heard before, that said, "You're doing it wrong." And it kind of startled me. And I thought, well, who's talking to me? And so I quit my mower so I could hear better, because maybe there's another person in my yard suddenly, and there's nobody there. And the voice was coming from my right side. And I heard it again, you're doing it wrong. And I said back to the voice, what am I doing wrong? And then I started to hear, you are walking in condemnation. You're supposed to be walking in freedom and liberty. And then I had a Christian song start going through my head. And as this song was going through my head, it was like my entire life flashed before me. I don't know how to explain it. It was just like I got this overwhelming feeling that I was living in a small box and I wasn't meant to be living in this small box, that I was meant to do more with my life. It makes me a little emotional because it was such a like transformative, weird moment of my life. And at that very moment, everything changed for me. And all of a sudden, I woke up and started seeing the world differently. Before that moment, I loved my job. I was going to stay in my job the rest of my life. Before that moment, I would have never, ever thought about leaving the church. Before that moment, I was striving every day to be this amazing Christian woman and serve God and save people. And in just an instant, everything changed. And
It's
I,
almost like you had it's reminiscent of a near death experience that is almost like the life review. It's
mhm,
the life review and the opening of greater understanding. Really
yeah,
fascinating while you're mowing your lawn.
yeah, I
Um,
don't
and
know.
isn't that the truth? Like God can speak to us anywhere.
Yes,
And,
yeah,
and that's really important, I think, for all of us
absolutely.
to
Yeah.
recognize.
And I think it was because I was open, because I wanted to know the truth. I was seeking every day. I was still writing in my prayer journal. I was still every single day I spent time praying and in the word of God, looking for answers and asking God to reveal himself to me and trying to figure it out. Like, and I don't know why I was doing that. It just was something inside of me so strong. I had to do it. And then it just all came at me at once within that one moment. And that's when I had this huge urge to just uproot my entire life. And I suddenly got this urge to quit my job. I suddenly got the urge to leave my church. I suddenly got the urge to start doing things that I wanted to do instead of things that I felt like I had to do.
Mm.
And it was scary.
Oh,
It
that
was
would be
very scary.
massively scary. And I imagine you didn't do that overnight, or maybe you did.
No, I do know that for probably 6 months, I remember I went to work and I told some of my coworkers, I think I'm going to quit my job. But
Mm,
I'd been there for like 11 years at that point, and I was terrified. I could not see myself doing anything else except for what I was doing. And I was terrified to leave the church. I was terrified, like, but all this inside of me is like, it's like I couldn't not do it. And so I remember when I put in my resignation at my job, I bawled and like it was such a hard moment. But it was exactly what has brought me to where I am now because I got a job within like I had an interview and I got a job that same day.
mm,
And then and it wasn't anything I wanted to do or where I just like I left the mental health field because I was like I'm not going to help people anymore.
mm,
And so I was working in a legal office. At the same time, I went and talked to my pastor at the church and said, I'm sorry, I something has told me I need to leave. And I wish I could remember the vision I had. I had some kind of a dream about leaving that church and going to a different church. And so that's why I told him, I'm like, I'm just going to follow God's calling. And so I left that church and I did go to a different one for a very short time because I didn't know what to do without going to church on a Sunday morning or a Wednesday night. Like that's what I'd been doing for, the last 15, 20 years.
mhm,
Um, and so I started making all these little moves in my life and changing things. And around the same time that I had that voice come to me, I heard also, you need to call your dad. And I wasn't in touch with my dad at the time. We
mhm,
had a huge fight when I was younger, and I quit talking to him. And I saw him maybe once or twice a year on a holiday and really didn't have much engagement with him at all. He didn't ever reach out to me. I didn't reach out to him. But I started having this overwhelming feeling, you need to reach out to your dad. And I fought it for probably a good 3 to 4 months because I didn't want to. And
Mhm.
then one day I couldn't fight it anymore. And so I sent him a text and I said, hey, you home? Can I come see you? And so I went over and slowly started to talk to him again. And within that first probably 3 months of talking to him again, he called me and told me he was diagnosed with cancer.
Wow.
And had I not listened to that voice that told me to reach out to my dad, I would have missed out on the last years of his life because he was diagnosed at the beginning of 2017. So 6 months after I had that strange spiritual experience in my backyard. And from 2017 to 2020 or 2020, he fought this cancer. And so I was beside him the whole time, going to all of his chemo treatments, trying to spend time with him, help him out, be there. And in the middle of that, still having my spiritual awakening and still having these strange things happening and strange like understandings. And then COVID hits. And that's when things got shaken up again.
Mm.
I in the middle of all that, I had been recruited to go work at a psychiatric facility for inpatient teenage girls and loved the job. I had worked there prior before. I wanted to go back, but I wasn't sure if I did because I didn't want to go back to mental health. But they begged me to come. And so I decided to go. And I was working in this mental health facility in this inpatient one also with my dad, trying to help him with his cancer, and things began to go really bad there. I started to be bullied by the people that were working there and was trying to just maintain my own mental health in between everything that was going on with me personally, with my dad's cancer, and with being bullied at work, all of it at once. And I was so mentally drained. And I remember I would like drive through red lights and not even know it. Like I was just not even conscious of a lot of things. And then in, of course, March of 2020, the world shuts down.
Mhm.
Um, and then I ended up in September of 2020, September 18th. I still remember all the dates. I was fired from my job. 5 days later, my dad passed away from cancer. I was sitting beside him. I had been doing foster care at the time because I'd had to have a hysterectomy in between all that. And thought, this was going to fulfill my desire to be a mother. So I had a foster daughter I was going to adopt because I was in complete chaos. She became chaotic and destroyed my home, threw everything around, and left. So I had three major losses within about 2 weeks. And
Wow.
the only thing that I could do, because I couldn't find a job, was go inward. And so I spent every single day for 3 months meditating. And when I was doing that, that is when I started to realize why I'd had all these experiences and what I was really supposed to be doing in the world. And that I needed to heal myself and all the trauma that I had been through in my own life in order to help other people heal. And that's when my dad started coming to visit me in spirit. And he started talking to me about my life and about how he treated me and asking me for forgiveness and talking to me about what it's like on the other side and giving me insight about how what we're taught is not really necessarily true. He started to explain to me that the church isn't all right and that you don't go to the other side and go to heaven and get judged by God, that you judge yourself and that you see your own life and do your own life review. And he explained to me how our healing impacts spirit healing. And it was blowing my mind away every single day.
I
There
bet.
was no way to deny everything that was coming at me. And so I just started to allow myself to receive all this intuitive messages and power and understanding of the entire universe. And I think because I was put in that position of being forced to be alone for 3 months by myself, that transformation was able to help me to open up to my own healing and to start the process of letting go of all the traumas that I went through in my life. That helped me to shift in my consciousness and raise my vibration to now help other people to release theirs. Um, because I look back at the time in mental health and I wasn't able to do that then. And now that I can see it more clearly, what it really is and how to release it, because of the insights I've received from the spirit realm, that gives me a little bit of an ability to bring compassion and love into this situation and help people transform into the same way that I've been able to. So,
I mean, when you're sharing this, it's just like, it's just this full circle experience where it's not that there's your soul knew your purpose. Like you knew you wanted to be there for people. You knew you wanted to help people. And so you went about it in different ways. And then you were brought to another way of healing, right? It was just like you were in that space, but not in the space that was what you really, really wanted to do, like as a soul. So
mhm,
as you opened up to this higher understanding, as you started to integrate and understand some of these experiences that felt weird before, but then you start to go, oh, okay, this is starting to make sense. And the messages that your dad gave, I can't help but feeling again that it's like a near death experience, the same things that they learned on the other
mhm,
side, that is, it's not God judging us and condemning us or
mhm.
saving us even, but it's more of just a understanding of what we learned and gained and did here and what we want to do differently, what we yeah, so it's I
Yeah.
just want to acknowledge everything that you said and I just see the beauty in all of your experiences.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And, and I think after my dad passed and I started getting those messages, I started studying near-death experiences because I'm like, what just happened to me? What is happening to me? And that's when I started hearing people that had actually transitioned to the other side and came back telling the same thing that I had just heard my dad tell me. And
Mm-hmm.
that's when I was like, oh, this is real. This is really how it is. Like I couldn't deny it anymore. There was no way for me to push away that truth and not actually become it and live it. And in many ways, I do feel like I had a death. The me that I was does not exist anymore. And that person, like, I can even look at pictures and be like, I don't even know who that person is anymore. And I mean, my physical appearance changed, the way I think changed, the way I engage with the world changed, the way I feel about myself changed. Like it still amazes me sometimes when I look around me and I see the amazing humans that I get to support every day. And like, it's so humbling. Like, how did I get here? How did this happen? But sorry, it makes me emotional, but this is like, my soul knew from the beginning at the time that it came here that eventually I would get there. It just took a lot of like course correction and kind of stepping in and being like, hello, this is the way. You're
Mm-hmm.
doing it wrong. And eventually I feel like I got it. Not that I'm like completely have it all together or know everything and I'm on the exact path I'm supposed to be on. I'm still trying to figure that out. But I know that I'm a little bit closer than I was.
Yeah, yeah. And isn't that the whole purpose of our existence, is to just continue moving forward and getting closer and closer to that deeper soul connection where we feel like we are more integrated, more aligned. In fact, I've seen where you call yourself the soul alignment mentor. So I
Yeah.
love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just aligning with that soul purpose. So wonderful. and I know a lot has happened since 2020, since your dad started communicating. And actually, if you're willing to share, I'd love to hear a little more, and I'm sure other people would like to hear. Like, what did that look like when your dad started making contact with you? Like, how did that feel? What did that look like? How did that develop?
Yeah. It was really slow because I still wasn't 100% sure about what I was experiencing as far as like connection with spirits. The very first time I can remember having contact with him, I love being in nature. I love hiking, and I was on a hiking trail during one of those 3 months that I was didn't have a job, and I heard a voice, another voice that said, "I love you. I've always loved you." And it kind of stopped me in my tracks. And I was like, what was that? That was weird. And I'm thinking, did I just say that to myself? And I remember I just kept walking. And then suddenly this tree beside me starts moving and cracking and making this weird noise I'd never heard. And I was like, that's really weird. And so I went back and I just was watching this tree. And then I heard it again. It said, I always loved you. And I was like, Dad?
Mm,
And so I sat down on a rock and I just started crying. And I was like, oh my God, I think my dad just came to talk to me. And so that's the very first thing I heard from him. And then one morning, this is probably the most profound one. Right before I woke up, I had an out of body experience with him where I actually left my body and I was in a different realm. And I was speaking with him, and he had blue jeans on and a blue and white striped shirt on. And we were talking about his experience, and I was really upset at the time and crying and like just having a really rough time. I was grieving him. Everything in my life was, falling apart. And so he grabbed me by my shoulders in this out of body experience, and he looked at me and he said, Ange, there's nothing, no one or anything on this earth that should cause you to be this upset. Because when you get back to this side, the only thing that matters is love. And in that moment, my everything, it was like all the burden that I was holding on to just fell off me.
mm,
And and I just like transformed into this joyous like moment, like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And I began to walk away and I was like, wait, you're dead. And so I turned around and looked at him and like, Dad, you're dead. How am I talking to you? And he smiled at me and he says, as above, so below. You can manifest anything you want, Ange. So I ran back and I was hugging him and I was just feeling super blissful, feeling his energy. And then he looks at me and he goes, I need to go. Your body's upset. And I didn't know what he meant. And I said, what do you mean, Dad? I'm fine. He goes, no, your body is upset. You need to go back. And that's when I realized I wasn't in my body. And so
mm,
I came back into my body and I was crying and grieving, of course. And so that experience happened. And after that, it was always during a meditation where I would be sitting and meditating, and he would just show up and start talking to me about something because I was really doing a lot of inner healing work. And I think he came to help me through that because it was really hard for me to remember the things I went through as a child, to let go of some of the sexual abuse and the mental abuse and physical abuse that I went through. And like he didn't see it when he was a human. And so he saw it from the other side, and he was coming back to help me work through that now so that it wasn't a part of who I was anymore. And so that experience of connecting with his soul as a spirit, like like I feel closer to him now than I did when he was a human. And I know he's still alive because he still comes to see me.
mm,
Um, and his personality is the same. And I've had physical evidence that these experiences were real. Like I had the shirt that he had on in that vision about a year ago. My stepmom called me and was like, hey, I was cleaning out your dad's closet and I came across this shirt and I don't know why, but I just felt like I was supposed to bring it to you.
mm.
And it was the shirt he had on in the vision. It was a
Wow.
blue and white striped shirt. And I told her, I go, you realize that dad had you give this to me. And she, kind of startled her and she didn't want to say anything. But I've had those kind of things over and over and over to confirm that I'm not making this up.
Yeah.
And And because of that connection with my dad, I have used that to be able to expand my energy and awareness to connect with other spirits as well. And I'm not perfect at it. I'm still growing and learning. Because I mean, if I was honest, I probably still have a little bit of fear inside of me of like, what am I engaging in? But it gets easier and easier the more I do it. And I think that the more you allow yourself to stay out of fear, the more that you can discover more and more of who you are and what is really truly around us spiritually.
Yeah. Yeah. And fear is fear has its gift,
Hmm.
and it does cause us to reflect and um to really figure out, like, is this something? If it's a tiger, obviously yes, the fear is legitimate, we need to run.
Right.
But in other aspects, sometimes our we can kind of fool ourselves with fear, just because fear is so elevated
Right.
here,
Right.
on this earth. In this experience, fear is very, very elevated. So taking that moment to kind of step back, and I love what you said about you were spending all this time in meditation and quiet practice, because how many times have I heard stories, or have I experienced myself, where spirit or a loved one or someone is trying to contact me, and they have to wake me up in the middle of the night because I'm too chaotic during the day, to hear and to feel and hear what their message is. But when we can connect to that, it's really, really beautiful. And I just, as you're sharing your story, I'm like, this is helping so many people who have had unusual experiences. They're like, they don't know what to do with it. They're like, why am I seeing this? And I think this is happening more and more. And people who have maybe not had this experience of growing up seeing spirit, or hearing these messages, they may question what's going on. And so I love that you shared your story with you. Now, I know since in the last 2, 3, 4 years that your line of work has changed, in that you are really doing this work at an energetic level rather than a clinical level. So you want to share a little bit about how that developed and what you're doing now?
Yeah. Um, like I said, I was working in mental health field, and as I was having my own awakening and doing my own healing, I started to realize, oh, there's a lot more to this healing thing than just what we're taught in the mental health field to help people with. And as I started doing it, I started doing a lot of energy work. I started working on my chakras. I started doing mindset work, really diving in and feeling all the feelings within me, allowing myself to be angry, allowing myself to see the things, my own patterns, my own trauma responses, my negative emotions, or, the things that I probably didn't even know I was doing. I started to notice myself, like look in the mirror and actually see myself. And that's when I realized that this is what I want to help people do, is to actually truly transform and heal their lives, not just put band-aids on it, not find a coping skill to run off their trigger, but to actually transform the trigger, to really dive in to discover that they have the same healing power within them that anybody else does that has gone through this process of healing and awakening. And to truly understand who you are, you have to uncover that part of yourself through all the pain. Like you have to face the pain, feel the pain, let it surface, which is not easy. And
No.
I did it. I spent years going into my own painful process. And as I was doing the transformation for myself, I knew eventually that this is where it was going to guide and lead me. And so now I help people dive into their own energy to find what trauma they're holding in their body, to understand why they think the way they think, why they behave the way they behave, why they believe the things they believe. And I honestly, if you would have asked me 3 or 4 years ago if I'd be doing what I'm doing now, I would have thought you were absolutely crazy. Like there is no way I would be doing this. But like I said before, there's something in you that you can't deny. When there's something pushing you towards something, like it's so uncomfortable to not do it than to do it, even though it's scary. And I was terrified to leave a full-time job to do this, and to help people and to do a spiritual healing, um, you know, mentorship for people like that. It doesn't make logical sense in the normal world for you to leave a job to try to do this. And so I had to work through that fear as well, to let go of that, to trust the universe that would everything would be supplied for me. And so far it's been almost a year that I have been doing this solo. And I think that in had I not went through my transformation, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing. And I had amazing healers in my life. I have a very good friend that I found online that helped me so very much. And without her, I wouldn't be here either. Like, so I believe because, like, the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, will bring you what you need to help you get where you're supposed to go. And it's up to you to engage in it. It's up to you to allow yourself to trust that process. And I was so desperate to transform my life and to be who I was supposed to be that I would have done anything and let anybody help me. And I'm so thankful for the journey where I had the people come into my life to help me. And now I get to help other people because they helped me. And that's how it's supposed to work. It's like my job when I work with a client isn't to, make them completely rely on me. My job is to get them to the point where they can then go help someone else. And that light continues to spread. That's
I,
what I want to happen.
I love that. I love that. And I can appreciate everything that you just said there because, a trigger is just evidence that there's more healing to do. That's what I have thought and felt for many years now. And that, if somebody had told me that I'd be having these conversations, even just a year or two ago, I would have been like, I don't know. I don't think so. So I really appreciate what you're saying. And everything is moving so quickly right now that I find that there's a lot of people, especially people who are interested in personal growth, interested in engaging um, in up leveling, in spiritual practices, that things are moving so quickly right now that what we're experiencing from one month to the next, from one year to the next, may look wildly different than what we expect, but it's all taking us to this place of healing and light and being able to help each other. We're all just walking each other home, as I like to say. As okay, so one of the questions I really love to ask everybody is, what are some of the daily practices that you enjoy, that you have found helpful in continuing to connect to your spirit, to those spiritual practices that are helpful?
Mhm. Meditation, absolutely, 100%. I know when I'm not meditating because I feel it. I get a little caught up in the world when I'm not allowing myself to be still, and I disconnect from spirit quite easily, just like anybody else can, when I'm not allowing myself to spend time in stillness and quiet, because that's how you hear spirit. That's how you develop a connection with somebody, is spending time with them. And so meditation has been one of the things that's transformed my life the most. That's why I got certified in it, because I'm like, this works. The other thing is energy work. Protecting my energy, clearing my energy, working through with my chakras. I am a Reiki master, and so I do teach my clients how to use energy, but I do it in a way of understanding what is programmed in the energy. Like I like to teach about what chakra has which energy in it, how that got developed, when it got developed in your life, and how can you heal that? How can you transform it? And I do that work on myself. Like I have to do the same work that I'm helping other people do. And then also just mindset. Like when you see a trigger in yourself, face it. When
Mm-hmm.
you feel something coming up that upsets you or angers you or causes you to feel disconnected from your higher self or your true spirit and your heart and your love, then face that. Don't let it just take off in your life and then consume you. And this takes time and it takes practice to do that because it's not something you want to do right away. Oh, that felt bad. I'm going to sit with it and feel it a little bit more. No, we're taught to run away from our bad feelings. So I have been able to get to a point where when I have a trigger, and it doesn't always happen right away, but it might happen in an hour or the next day, I can be like, oh, that's why that was there. And so I can sit down and ask my higher self, my spirit team, go inside of my heart and be like, where did this trigger come from? And how can I transform this for good? How can I use this pain for purpose? And so those three things are a must for me. And that's usually what I teach my clients as well.
That's wonderful. Yeah, and that's the key to teaching is teaching what you know.
Hmm.
And when we hear from teachers that it doesn't feel authentic, it's because they're asking us to do things that they haven't done. So that's why the work that you do is so important and so authentic. It's because you have been there, you've done that, you've experienced it. And yeah, so share a little bit. I'm sure there's people listening that would love to connect with you. Share a little bit about how what where they can connect with you.
Yeah. So I'm really on all the social platforms, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, all of that. So if you look up Soul Alignment Mentor, you'll probably find me. Um, and you're always welcome to email me, or you can go to my website, angieharris.org, and all my services are listed on there. I do have, like, if you want to just set up a consultation with me, we can talk, or I do readings, both psychic, healing, mediumship. I do all that. And then I also have offer courses and one-on-one mentorship for people that actually want to start going through that transformation and healing just like I have.
Wonderful. That is wonderful. Thank you so much for being here today, Angie. I just appreciate you so much. And I loved hearing your story today.
Thank you for allowing me to share.